ਅੱਜ ਸ਼ੈਰਟਨ ਗਿਲਫੋਰਡ ਹੋਟਲ ਇਨ ਸਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਰੀ ਬੋਰਡ ਆਫ ਟ੍ਰੇਡ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਹੁਣ ਵਾਈਟ ਰੌਕ ਸਰੀ ਬੋਰਡ ਆਫ ਟ੍ਰੇਡ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਦੋਨੇ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨਾਂ ਮਰਜ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਅੱਜ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ of immigration, citizenship and refugee Mr. Marc Miller ਆ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੀ ਰਿਮਾਰਕ ਦੇਣੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛਣੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਰੂਬਰੂ ਕਰਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਸ਼ੋਰਟਲੀ CJ Sidhu reporting from Sheraton Guildford, Surrey.
Everyone, please help me welcome Minister Marc Miller to the stage.
Thank you so much, Anita, and hi everyone. Nice to see all of you. It is it's a real pleasure to be here in Surrey. I'm beginning and do thank you, Anita, for acknowledging the lands that we're on. These are very important acknowledgements and give us a moment to reflect on our past and our present and future with Indigenous peoples. So I want to. You mentioned, your history, but Sukh and Ken, Ken and I just came from a citizenship ceremony where we welcomed another 40 new Canadians from 18 countries to Surrey, and just to see the smiles on their faces as they're celebrating this amazing moment that I didn't do because I got given it on birth, but it's amazing to see people that have fought to be Canadians. And work so hard, and they're here, and to celebrate their day is really, really cool. And so that is a pleasure of mine. Sukh says, and I think a number of people agree with him that I have one of the hardest jobs out there. This was a very easy ceremony to be at because I was joking, but they can't yell at me until they swear the oath, and then they don't have to listen to me. But it's just really cool to be able to celebrate it with them and be a small part of that, of their future. Comme Anita l'a souligné, l'immigration a façonné le Canada depuis ses débuts, à l'exception évidemment des Autochtones qui sont ici depuis des temps immémoriaux. Tous les Canadiens résidents permanents qui sont ici ont leur histoire qui commence avec l'immigration comme moi-même, sauf quelques générations antérieures. Immigration shapes our economy. Continues to shape Surrey's economy, especially where it is situated geographically and how it's evolved over the last decades. Canada's labour market growth in the last few years has been entirely driven by newcomers, about 96%. When we talk about immigration, these aren't abstract conversations. They're everybody's lived experience. 50% of Surrey has 25% of Canada. We're talking about our friends, families, co-workers, partners, neighbors, kids. It shapes our communities. Across Canada and major cities like Surrey, Vancouver, there are numerous diverse people and unique cultural celebration. We celebrate Diwali and Passover, Christmas and Ramadan, Nowruz, and Lent. I don't celebrate Lent, but I sometimes pretend I do. You're supposed to give something up, and I give up giving up things in Lent. But the diversity, I'm not the best Christian in the world. I'll admit that publicly. The diversity of our communities here in Canada connects us to the global markets, by extension to global issues. The record levels of refugees and displaced people caused by conflicts and war that will probably hit another historical summit this year. Political, economic upheaval, and climate change-driven disasters is felt by many here. Canadians want us to help these families, and they want Canada to do things. Seniors and children as well, who are some of the most vulnerable. And we have a proud history of refugee resettlement. I was in Geneva in the late fall, just before Christmas, and Canada is still a beacon of hope for a lot of countries that have given up hope. And I think that's something that's important to remember. We criticize ourselves a lot here in Canada, and there's lots of internal debates, but Canada, for a lot of countries, is still seen as that beacon of light for the programs that we have, the way we welcome newcomers. Not that it's perfect, but it is something. It's important sometimes to step outside your country and realize how good you actually have it. And I think that's that's an immense part of the privilege that I have as being the immigration minister. Is I talk to my other colleagues, and they're happy to see what we're doing, and happy to copy it sometimes and give it perhaps a fancier name and claim it's their own. But you see a lot of Canada's programs and some of the work that the US does, for example. We found new permanent pathways recently for Yazidi refugees, survivors of Daesh, Afghans following the fall of Kabul. Canada is also a temporary haven for well over 300,000 Ukrainians fleeing illegal invasion of their country by Russia, as well as those facing a devastating humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Immigration also brings global communities here through programs for international students. We will probably talk about that in the question and answer session. Everyone knows that Surrey has about half of the designated learning institutions in British Columbia. Mais avec une population vieillissante et des familles moins nombreuses, l'immigration est essentielle pour garantir que nous disposons de travailleurs dont nous avons besoin pour continuer à soutenir l'infrastructure sociale dont les Canadiens s'attendent. With the aging population that we have, 7 workers to 1 person when I was born in 1973, now 3 or 2 to 1 retiree. That's a crisis in the making if we don't do something immediately. And you know, the choice is almost binary. We could have a baby boom. We know that the number of people having kids keeps dropping, as well as the number of kids per family. Even if we had a baby boom today, we'd have to wait 20, 23 years to see that productivity happen. So we can't just stop immigration, but we can do a better job at it, and we can be smarter about it. We'll maybe talk about that in the question and answer session. We're getting workers in to deal with addressing the real challenges that we're facing today, building more homes. The need for construction and workers and tradespeople, particularly as a demographic that doesn't comprise as a percentage of the population as many newcomers as it should. And we need people to staff our hospitals. That's just the reality. With that aging population, we need to staff those hospitals, and that's part of the equation that sometimes we don't look at carefully enough. And you know, as members of the Board of Trade, I've said this in Toronto, I've said this in Montreal. I think probably as a society we've gotten a little complacent or lazy in selling to ourselves and to the population at large the value and the beauty of immigration. Even the federal government's not immune to that criticism. We have taken it as sort of as part of Canada's natural DNA. But then when we see issues of social cohesion and challenges based with very large volume, we sometimes don't take that step back to realize how important it is to the country. And I think that's a social reflection that we have to have as we continue to convince ourselves that that consensus that has been carefully built doesn't erode, because it can be carefully attacked, or it can be easily attacked when you have issues like rising interest rates, inflation. There is also sometimes a tendency to blame immigrants, and I don't think we want a country like that. We see a lot of countries that are having that toxic debate, and we can still be quite proud, I think, as one of the few countries where we see large increases in immigration, where we still have that every major party is still very positive about immigration. It's tenuous, but I think we have to keep being quite positive about that, because the political opportunism rears its head in very many ways, and you don't want to see immigrants being targeted in the next election, or even as part of the social culture of politics in Canada. One of the steps that I took that probably impacts Surrey more than some other places around the country, there are places where it impacts it more in Ontario, was to deal with the integrity issues in around the international student programs. International students provide social and cultural benefits and educational benefits to Canadians, but to preserve these benefits and a program that was based on having some of the best institutions in the world radiate through its international students, we've created a situation where many international students are left vulnerable. And so this is something that I am and my team, along with my provincial counterparts, are working to improve the integrity of. Unfortunately, some institutions have been increasing their intake of students without taking into account critical supports like housing, and healthcare, including mental health. This renders students vulnerable to abuse and exploitation, coupled with sometimes the tuition rates that they pay at 3, 4, 5, 6 times the rates of what domestic children pay. It's why we're taking a number of actions to reform the international student program and to preserve its integrity. Among a suite of measures I introduced in the fall and then in January was a temporary 2-year national cap on new study permits. This will help ensure that growth under the program is stable and sustainable, as well as spreading out the number. I'm the federal government. I can't be privileging any particular province, spreading out the number of visas available to provinces in order to deal with that, the fairness aspect of the international visas program. In addition, my department is working on establishing a recognized institutions framework to support post-secondary institutions that provide adequate supports for international students. And I've already had a number of conversations with principals, rectors, or presidents of these institutions. Under this model that was announced prior to the January announcement, an educational institution that provides strong supports and services to international students, including helping them in finding housing, would get benefits such as priority processing for study permits for students destined to their institution. We're also taking critical steps to recalibrate the number of temporary residents writ large in Canada, with the aim of reducing the percentage of temporary residents to 5% over the next 3 years from 6-7% of where it is now. There's sometimes a misunderstanding about what that actually looks like and what the face of people that are here temporarily actually looks like. The tendency is to think of people that are working in the agricultural sector or in the fish processing sector. That's only about 10%. The rest of it, international students, people that are on postgraduate work permits, people that are here as a benefit of our international trade agreements that we have across Canada, across the world, where we send people abroad. They can also send people here. And some of the temporary asylum that we've provided, for example, to Ukrainians as well as asylum seekers. That comprises a much more complex pie chart than simply the knee-jerk reflection to think this is just temporary foreign workers. Reducing that is, there's some art, there's some science to it, but we have to get it right. If it's just the federal government doing it, it's not recognizing the need for having temporary labor in this country. We're in a period of food inflation. We know that there are jobs that can't be filled by Canadians. There's many reasons to have temporary labor in this. One of them isn't to have them stuck here with no prospect of any future. And I think that's the challenge that I had discussing on Friday in Montreal with my immigration ministers from different provinces, is that how do we do this in a way that doesn't damage the economy, maintains the dignity of the people that are here, while making sure that we deal with some of the historical flows that have jumped. We, as a country, have been at 2% temporary residency. It's jumped to 5, 6, 7 very quickly. That comes with challenges that volume has on affordability, on the cost of shelter, but it's also had some very positive effects on the economy. So ramping that down, making sure we get that a little under control, is as much a duty of mine as it is the provincial counterparts that know their labor markets sometimes more intimately than a guy from Montreal does. And getting it right is exceedingly important in the context, because we don't want to damage local or national economies. That goes to the theme that I think we have to deal with as a country in the challenges that newcomers face every day, but also as the aggregate volume impact has on places like Surrey, on places across the country where people naturally flow to. But I think it's part of our government being responsible in making sure that people are properly welcomed, and that Canada has the capacity to welcome people in the historic amounts that it has. And we continue as a country to make sure that we bring in 500,000 permanent residency, most of whom will select to become Canadian citizens. It'll be more than the 40 today from the 18 countries that we welcomed over the next few years, but it's important. And if we don't get it right, we again risk the social cohesion challenges that we face when something gets a little out of kilter. So that diversity, I think, is beautiful, and I am proud to be the Minister of Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship when we are at such an important time It makes for really long days for the job that I hold and that Ken and Sukh hold me to account for whenever they come to see me and say, we need this for Surrey, and if you don't do it, we're gonna wring your neck. Sukh tries, he does try, but and Ken gives it his best shot. But we have a great team here that support Surrey. I'm the least knowledgeable of Surrey in the room, but I feel like it's sometimes a second home when I have guys like Ken and Sukh and John, for that matter, really fighting hard for the businesses that are here, but also the people that make it such a great place. So I'll leave it at that. We're going to do a question and answer session, so this is where the hard part starts. And looking forward to sitting down. And thank you again for the wonderful welcome to your city.
Respected Minister of Immigration, thank you very much for coming here in Surrey. And thank you, Surrey Board of Trade, for organizing this event. Very quick, but important question. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Conference Alliance. We are the leading conference organizer in Canada. We do organize conferences coast to coast. Now, sir, I have a quick question for you. We used to get special event code from IRCC when we organize an event. And that increases our credibility because our participants are coming from all over the world, not only from Canada, but also from other countries as well. For the last 6 months, we are not getting any IRCC special event codes. We are trying to contact with IRCC, and there is only an email address available in this respect. So can you please give us some direction, like how can we contact with IRCC, and what is the reason we are not getting IRCC special event code for our conferences? Thank you, sir.
I can't say why you're not getting it, but we do provide it. My best recommendation to you would be to link up with my team, and we can work together on the special events coordination. We certainly do it. I'm certainly sometimes directly involved in making sure that people that have larger events, structured events, can do it in a way that doesn't leave everyone waiting for a visa with 1 week to go. I have been able to tease out some of the trends, I think, that pose challenges to people organizing large events. I think first and foremost is the lead time and making sure that everyone has their paperwork together. That is of a particular challenge depending on the source country where the people coming from originate. You've seen this publicly, but it's no secret that we are facing a lot of challenges with visa processing in India with only 4 or 5 dedicated IRCC workers on site, and that is a fraction of what we had even 6 or 7 months ago. Our global processing, meaning people that are outside the particular country where the request is coming from, has been able to pick up the slack, but there are some things that we have to do in country that does create that backlog. So the volume that I am seeing at the department is historic. There are lots of people who want to come to Canada for lots of different reasons. Most if not all legitimate, but it does have an effect on the volume and the planning. So as much as you can with a large lead time. We can scramble if it's an emergency, but I don't recommend it. But my best recommendation to you for your event would be to reach out to my team, and we can certainly look into it. It doesn't mean everyone. I don't know when your event is, but if it's soon, the clock is ticking. But we can try and do our best and get people through.
Yes, talk to your local
or obviously
MP.
talk to Sukh, because Sukh has some familiarity with this.
Next question.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, and your staff and our local politicians for your support. I'm on the advisory board of the Immigrant Networks, and one of the questions we, as a social enterprise organization, we have 23,000 new Canadian immigrant members, and 14,000 of those have been successfully employed since 2020 through our AI technology and use of combined human-to-human contact. What we'd like to know is, an organization such as yours, how can we serve the outcomes and the needs of your ministry through what it is that we do? Because there's many social organizations that are attempting to try to help, but we would like to work in line with what your needs are and how we can serve you.
Again, my best recommendation is that you met my team earlier, is that our team stay in contact. What you do may not completely overlap with the needs you have from us, but I think to have a better working relationship might be helpful. If we can't help you, we should at least be there to let you know, and vice versa. I think there are some potential areas where we can work together. Labor force matching has been extremely difficult. Even though we say that we have points and we try to match them, often people are giving up an entire generation to come here, which isn't right. You're actually leaving money on the table as long as innovation and capital. So I think that is what you have briefly presented to me prior to my speech seems really cool, and so we should talk a bit more about that and be glad to set that up with our teams.
Next.
Hi, thank you, Anita, for arranging this great get-together, and for Minister Marc Miller for coming over to listen to our questions and issues in the city of Surrey. As you know, city of Surrey is growing fast, and Anita, our man, is trying to cope up with all the concerns and business antidotes that we are trying to achieve here. And IRCC, as we know, they're trying very hard and creating a safe haven for refugees and newcomers to come to Canada. And as they arrive here, they are very well taken care of. We appreciate Minister for that. We know that there are some problems always occur, and especially with the second and third generation Canadians are having really hard hit on employment. So there's a large unemployment rate now for that generation. And due to that, there are many youth who are getting very depressed, and they couldn't understand how the game all changed altogether, not finding any employment or not getting into any productive line of business. So the thing is that it's getting into, resulting into what we can call is mental health issues, and it's on the rise day by day. And we hear a lot of stories every single day that this is what's happening, and we don't know how to deal with that, how to help youth to kind of come out of that. And another, that unemployment rate. And then there is unemployment rate in international students as well, because we are nonprofit and progressive intercultural community services trying to help all different groups of people, including seniors, youth, and women, to help with their employment, and also to help them to integrate and settle in Canada. In one day, we had 18 international students came through our door to ask for employment, so we didn't know how to help them, although we're trying very hard to find something for them. So lack of housing, as you already mentioned in your speech, that it's a huge issue as well. So reverse immigration, we are seeing many people going back to their countries on daily basis. So we really are in that situation that we know that ministry is working very hard and trying to solve the problems, but can we just know how it's going to be handled? Thank you.
That's a huge question.
Yeah, it's a really big question. Plus, I told you in my speech before, I'm the least knowledgeable person on Surrey in the room, so I can talk to you about some of the trends we're seeing, tightening labor markets, the work that we've done to get the international student visa program under a little better control. When you have half the designated learning institutions offering probably not the most robust, often business degrees to students, it's no secret that a lot of the people that came were not necessarily to study, a prospect perhaps of getting a job and perhaps permanent residency. So there are some very important choices that will have to be made over the coming months. As the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, I need to be able to focus on those three things. Unfortunately, it's drawn me into the areas of housing, labor markets, filling education. It shouldn't be an area where I necessarily should be the only person having an opinion or being able to decide, particularly in an area where the in this case, the British Columbia government has a role to play in regulating institutions, regulating the labor markets. And that's something that I've had to work collaboratively with them. And I think in the last few months, the government of BC has done some really important work in trying to look at that ecosystem that's been created by international students in Surrey and around British Columbia to try and get rid of some of the worst parts of the ecosystem. It doesn't mean everything's perfect now, and you've highlighted that that is not the case. I took a difficult decision to reduce the work hours from 40 to 24 because we know that students that are working anything over 20 hours, 23, 24, especially over 30, aren't really prioritizing their education, or if they are, it is severely jeopardizing them. So perhaps that falls in the context of a tightening labor market at an opportune point in time. Wasn't necessarily the reason I did it. We shouldn't have kids working 40 hours. Conversely, not having a job, and if you're not studying, can really affect your mental health. People define themselves through what they do, and when they don't do anything, it can really affect you in terms of your health generally, but particularly your mental health. You know, there are pockets of this reality across the country. It's sort of peppered around Ontario when it comes to international students. And it's frankly an unfortunate situation. And I think that's something that we have been carefully trying to address over the course of the last 6, 7, 8 months, especially a younger part of the population. Now we do have a young segment of the population that is here. It may be that they are not going anywhere. Having to deal with that, I think, will be a challenge that we will have to address with, in this case, the government of British Columbia. I spoke to Minister Kang on Friday. We'll be having continual conversations with her in how they deal with this over the next coming weeks or months. I think that's one of the points that I was trying to make as part of my prepared speech, is that you take these. The international visa program is not something that was capped or as heavily regulated as for the last 40 years, and largely it behaved in a way that was responsible. It's only been in the last few years that things have gone a bit squirrely, and it's something that I think we'll have to continue to be making reforms, because at the end of the day, as much as I talk about mechanisms and procedures and reforms, you're talking about individuals who need to be treated with dignity. It may be the reality that some of these, a chunk of these students will have to go back to their home countries, or there will be others that will find a pathway to permanent residency or even continue their education, and we need to do that in a humane and a humanitarian way.
Next.
Hello, Mr. Miller. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jasbir Deogan. I am immigration consultant with Unique Immigration. I just want your take. What's the future for immigration in terms of all the pilot projects that are going on, especially towards the home support worker pilot, which is expiring next month? It was a 5-year program. The next one is RNIP. Looks like it has wrapped up, but maybe you guys are revamping it. So that's the next one. I want to have your take on that. The third is agri-food pilot, which is very important for Canada, I understand. And the last one is Canadian Experience Class for the PGWP holders who have experience in Canada for 1 or maybe 2 years, but they do not have a pathway for PR. So if you can please shed some light on these. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll run through those briefly. It's no secret to anyone listening to me in the last little while that we are going to have to focus on the domestic labor market that's here, including doing increased domestic draws. I've been trying to make sure that my colleagues in the province focus, and they already do this with their PNP, but focus on the people that are here as opposed to having the sort of the knee-jerk reaction of doing it, going abroad. As much as there's talent abroad, there's talent here, and as we are looking at that domestic labor pool, to properly match supply and demand is super important, and especially it is a potential of reducing people that are here temporarily if they have the skill set needed for permanent residency and have that Canadian experience. There's no reason why they should. That's not everyone, but it is. It's a pool of people that are already here. Their impact on affordability at a macroeconomic level is already sort of, I would say, baked in. So that it makes sense from an economic perspective. We have to probably tailor and get it right. So those are my thoughts on that. I think you'll sort of have to watch the coming months for any official announcements on that. The rural northern immigration pilot is going to be made permanent, which is a good thing. I don't know the timing on it because I announced it a few months ago, but we are in the process of making it permanent, sort of doing a new pilot. I have to actually announce a new pilot to make something permanent, which sounds exactly the way IRCC sounds sometimes, but it will be permanent. There's also sort of in tandem with that, maybe of less interest in BC, but I think important for the national identity of our country, the Francophone immigration pilot, which will have sort of this similar type of parameters to it. And on the caregiver pilot, I think you should look out for some announcements in the next coming month. We know how important caregivers are, so I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. And I think at some point we should work towards making that permanent.
Thank you, Anita, for hosting this lovely event, and thank you, Minister, for joining us in our beautiful city. My name is Lenya Wilkes, and I work at Diversity Community Resources Society. As Anita shared earlier, Surrey is growing, on an average 28 new residents daily. It has the largest Black population, the largest urban Indigenous population. It also has a very large youth population. So with a city that big and growing so rapidly, in nonprofit, what we see is lots of wait lists on the services that we offer, language, case management, counseling. And thankfully through IRCC, we're funded through our equity project to build up grassroots organizations that are doing this work on the side of their desks through volunteer. But this program ends in August, sadly. But we need more organizations doing this work. And so my question is there a plan for IRCC to continue supporting projects like this that are building out other organizations to support immigrants as they settle? Because this is a need that is needed in the city of Surrey.
Yeah, and I can't speak to your organization or the funding, and doubtless you're doing great work. You just see the need across the country of having more integrated services that deal with inclusion, diversity. IRCC can't, it does have to make sure it is focusing on what it focuses on. There are other parts of our government that are focused on that as well, but I think we have to be part of that conversation because often it is newcomers that are the face of diversity as well. I go to a lot of citizenship ceremonies, so it's hard not to notice that. But I think it's definitely a good thing. But there are challenges that come with integration that IRCC can be a part of. So I would say stay tuned, but and also stay tuned with my team as well to follow up on funding. And didn't know it was coming to an end in August, so work with us.
Paola?
Hello, thank you, Minister, for being here. Thank you, Anita, for the invitation and for hosting this. My name is Paola Murillo. I'm the director of an organization called Latin Cover. For the last 16 years, we have been working in creating the voice for the Latin Americans. And it has been great. We are over 180,000 Latin Americans who have chose BC as their home. But we see now with the current laws and what's happening, I would love to have your advice on how to communicate to my community. We know that we have the new restriction for the law for the visa for the community from Mexico. And also the students. I have a lot of people in my organization. We're around 35 people, volunteers, and people who work with us, who are panicked, who doesn't know what is going to be their future, what it's going to look like. We don't have, we're like, everything is going to be fine, try to build the confidence, you're going to be okay here. We need people in Canada, but they're afraid. People is afraid. The message that we understand, especially now, we know in 2018, according to the message from the media from CBC, from 338,000 in 2018 temporary laborers, now we have over 600 people who has applied for visas. So we understand, it's a pain. How can we communicate it to the people who really is here and try to make Canada their home country? That's one question. Second, my husband works in the farm industry, my brother in the construction. Both are suffering to find qualified people. And now with cutting the students, the hours of a student from 25 hours to 20, and all those changes is quite dramatically from them to adjust how do they jobs and actually thinking that they will have to pay now more for labor force. What do you also recommend that this will, how can companies can operate properly now?
I mean, Canada often gets accused of not as high productivity as the US. I think there's a lot of structural arguments that you could put forward. Younger labor force, relatively, the productivity increases with age. The way we tax people creates challenges as to when you measure how you measure global productivity, which companies recognize earnings in which jurisdiction. Those are all sort of challenges. But it's doubtless that in some areas there is wage depression, and I think we have to address that. I didn't create an international student program for people for kids to go be working in the Walmart or whatever. If they choose to do it, it's fine. But that's not the idea behind the program, and that's why I reduced it from 40 to 20, 40 to 25, not 25 to 20. And I think that's generally a good thing. I did it with enough forewarning so that people can make their financial decisions as to when they apply to Canada, knowing that it is expensive to live here, and also increase some of the solvency requirements for students. Just because we need a program that was destined towards students. If we wanted a labor stream that is lower waged, I can do that, but I'm not going to do it because on the backs of students that are paying 50 grand, 40 grand, it doesn't make sense. Some of the measures that we had in place are ones that companies adjusted to post-COVID. It used to be, for some areas, 1 in 10 temporary foreign workers. It's up to 3. We've reduced it to 2, which is a middle ground. We haven't gone completely all the way back to pre-COVID numbers. I think employers are going to have to, again, do what we're trying to do, which is deploy efforts and not having necessarily the knee-jerk reaction of going on trade missions and getting people from abroad and then sort of returning them home. We have to look at that domestic labor force. If it means paying people a bit more, perhaps there's an argument to do it. That's not a decision I'm going to figure out here on the stage today, but there is a growing in a tightening labor market pool of labor. Now, there are market mismatches that exist. I get that, but there is going to have to be an adjustment by industry as to some of the decisions that were taken, I think very importantly, both for productivity, both to reduce the number of temporary people here that has gone up by a factor of 2 or 3 over the last or during COVID. So those are adjustments that'll need to be made.
So Anita, today, Minister, I was about to speak in Punjabi, but I know Hindi as well. But anyways, the Minister of Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees, Mr. Marc Miller came, and the wide range of questions came from immigration consultant, some business people, organization. What do you think about today's presentation by Minister?
Well, we know that immigration is a very complicated subject. There's so many different intricate areas to focus on, and that was quite evident in today's audience at the Surrey Board of Trade. I think, number one, we need to tie industry needs to curriculum development. We need to tie industry needs to immigration as well. We have the greatest number of manufacturers within British Columbia right here in Surrey. We have a construction sector that really needs labor. We're building a city, basically a downtown core from the ground up, and our development sector needs labor. Our agriculture sector, 1/3 of our land base is agricultural. They need labor, but we need to have really flexible ways to bring in newcomers to meet economic demands. And that really is the message of the event today.
So the biggest challenge, Anita, that I ask Minister and Member of Parliament Sukh Dhaliwal as well, the biggest challenge is the newcomers, and we have a shortage of workers in certain areas, and then the infrastructures. We don't have housing, our roads are not up to speed, and the another challenge is people are coming to Surrey. It's most welcome because we represent Surrey and Brampton in Ontario. So as Minister said, they need to be spread out. But how we balance infrastructure with hospitals, roads, schools, that new immigrants feeling a very stretched with the limit of their dollars.
Well, we need revolutionary change in federal and provincial government budgets to build the infrastructure that we so desperately need in Surrey. No one thought that Surrey would grow this quickly, and we really only have one hospital, and that's not even a full-service hospital. So, I mean, we need a lot, and we need political courage to focus on investments and spending right here in Surrey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Always pleasure. And you were in the morning event and now Surrey Board of Trade event. And what do you observe during this?
Well, I think the minister touched on some very excellent questions that came from the group here at the Surrey Board of Trade. Our office is seeing the phenomena of people who are here, they've taken their education, they've found work, but they can't seem to get enough points to qualify for their permanent residency, and they're here, they're housed, they're making a contribution, and this concerns me. I'm hearing from these people, and I think the minister has really aligned a very good strategy to work with the provinces, you know, to the provincial nominee programs, because we don't have to worry about these people assimilating or getting oriented to our economy or our society. They're already here. And they're making that contribution. So I think that's an excellent strategy. And I know from our office standpoint, because we hear from these folks, we're going to start working more closely with the MLAs in Surrey, you know, with Minister Kang, to see what we can do to, you know, join forces to help the people who really do deserve to stay in Canada.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Always a pleasure.
All right.
Have a good day. The minister ਨੇ ਬੜੀ ਕਲੀਅਰਲੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਦੱਸੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੀ ਕਮੈਂਟ?
ਦੇਖੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਪੋਰਟਫੋਲੀਓ ਐਸਾ ਪੋਰਟਫੋਲੀਓ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਚੈਲੰਜਿੰਗ ਹੈਗਾ ਔਰ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਮਿਲਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਬੜੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਢੰਗ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੈਂਡਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਅੱਜ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਉਹੀ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਐਵਰੀਡੇ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਪਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਦੇਖੋ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਬਣਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਉਹ ਗਰਾਊਂਡ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੋਂ ਗ੍ਰਾਸ ਰੂਟਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਣਦੀਆਂ। ਔਰ ਅੱਜ ਜਦੋਂ ਗ੍ਰਾਸ ਰੂਟਸ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਆਏ, ਪਲਾਨ ਜਾਈਆਂ, ਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪੂਰੀ ਆਸ ਆ ਕਿ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਟਾਫ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਇਨਪੁਟ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਊਗਾ, ਜਾ ਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਡਿਜ਼ਾਇਰੇਬਲ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਲਿਆਉਣਗੇ। ਔਰ ਜੇ ਦੇਖੋ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਬੇਸਡ ਔਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਮੰਗ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਤੇ ਉਹ ਐਕਟ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ।
ਸੋ ਮਿਸ ਧਾਲੀਵਾਲ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਇਸ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਂਡ ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ਨਸ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਦੇ ਚੇਅਰ ਵੀ ਹੋ, ਉਸ ਦੇ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਕਰਕੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਰੈਗੂਲਰਲੀ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਨਾਲ ਵਾਹ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਵੀ ਲੋਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੀ ਸੋਚ ਰਹੇ? ਦੇਖੋ ਇਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਨਫਲਕਸ ਬੜੀ ਵੱਡੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਉਹ ਸਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੋਇਆ, ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਹੋਇਆ, ਇੱਥੇ ਸੀਗੀ, ਵੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼। ਦੇਖੋ ਲੋਕ ਇਹ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਇਹ ਮੋਸਟਲੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੋਸਟ ਸੈਕੰਡਰੀ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸਿਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ। ਸੂਬੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਸਪੌਟ ਦੇਣੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ। ਔਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗਾ IRCC ਜਾਂ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦੇਣਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਰਿਕੁਆਇਰਮੈਂਟਸ ਪੂਰੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਬਈ 10,000 ਜਾਂ ਉਦੋਂ ਹੁਣ 20,000 ਹੈਗੀ, ਉਹ ਫੀਸ ਹੈਗੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ 6+ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਇਲ ਸਕੋਰ ਹੈਗਾ, ਐਡਮਿਸ਼ਨ ਲੈਟਰ ਹੈਗੀ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦੇ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ। ਅਤੇ ਬੜੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਗਲਤਫਹਿਮੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਨਫਲੈਕਸ ਆ ਇਹ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਕਰੀ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸਿਸ ਦਾ ਮਸਲਾ ਸੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੁਝ ਕੁ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੁਐਸਚਨੇਬਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੀ ਕਾਲਜਸ ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਠੱਲ ਪਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਜਦੋਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਹ ਮੰਗ ਸੀ ਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਇੰਟਰਵੀਨ ਕੀਤਾ। ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਸੀਗੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੱਟ ਲਾਇਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬਜਾਏ ਕਿ ਸਾਰੇ ਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਰੀ ਅਤੇ ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਆ ਕੇ ਠਹਿਰਨ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਸੂਬਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਅੱਡੋ ਅੱਡ ਸਪੌਟ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਵੀ ਇੰਨੇ ਸਪੌਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਨਾਲ ਬਿਲ ਕਰ। ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੀ ਹੋਊਗਾ, ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਕ੍ਰਾਸ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਡਿਮਾਂਡ ਸੀਗੀ ਉਹ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾਣਗੇ। ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਦੱਸਿਆ
ਕਿ ਜੇ ਅੱਜ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੇਬੀ ਬੂਮਰ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗਰੋਥ ਰੇਟ ਵੱਧਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਬਰਥ ਰੇਟ, ਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਅਗਲੇ 20 ਸਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਸਟੇਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨ ਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਣਗੇ। ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ
ਇਟਸ ਮੋਰ ਇਕਨੋਮੀ
ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਹੈਗੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇਹ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਨੀਤੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ, ਹੁਣ ਇਕਨੋਮਿਕ ਨੀਤੀ। ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਇਕਨੋਮੀ ਨੂੰ ਸਟਰੋਂਗ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਡਜ਼ ਨਾਟ ਮੈਟਰ ਕਿਹੜੀ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਆ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟਸ ਲਿਆਉਣੇ ਪੈਣੇ ਹੈਗੇ, ਪਰ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਣੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਟੈਕਨੀਕਲ ਟ੍ਰੇਡਸ ਪੀਪਲ ਹੋਣ। ਹੁਣ ਅੱਜ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਲੋਕਲ ਡਰਾਜ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ, ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ ਨੂੰ ਕੱਟ ਲਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਬੈਲੈਂਸ ਰੱਖ ਕੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਚੱਲਿਆ ਜਾਊ।
ਮਿਸਟਰ ਧਾਲੀਵਾਲ, ਮੇਰਾ ਲਾਸਟ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਪੋਸੀਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ, ਇਹ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਟੈਂਟੇਟਿਵਲੀ ਤਾਂ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਈਅਰ ਅਕਤੂਬਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਆ, ਪਰ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੀ ਇਹ ਨੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਪੀਪਲ ਆਏ ਆ ਬਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਬੈਕਲੌਗ ਨਿਕਲ ਜੂਗਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੱਕਾ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੈ?
ਦੇਖੋ, ਜਦੋਂ ਬੈਕਲੌਗ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਬੈਕਲੌਗ ਕਰਕੇ ਗਏ ਸੀ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ, ਲੈਟ ਵੀ ਸੀ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਐਂਡ ਗ੍ਰੈਂਡ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਦੀ ਕੈਟਾਗਰੀ ਨੂੰ ਲਾਓ। ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ, ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਐਂਡ ਗ੍ਰੈਂਡ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੇ। ਜੇ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੈਸਟ ਤੇ ਬਰਾਈਟੈਸਟ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟਸ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਣਾ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਫੈਮਲੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਨਾਲ ਯੂਨਾਈਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਨਾ। ਤੇ ਉਹ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਬੰਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਤਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਬੈਕਲੌਗ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਆ ਕੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਬੈਕਲੌਗ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਲੀਨ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗੇ। ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਸ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਗਈ ਸੀਗੀ ਉਹ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਲੀਨ ਕਰਨ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਤੁਲੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ, ਔਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪੂਰੀ ਆਸ ਆ ਕਿ ਅਗਲੇ ਸਾਲ ਤਾਈਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਚੇਂਜਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਆਉਣਗੀਆਂ, ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਲੋਕਲ ਡਰਾਜ ਹੋਣ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਸੀ, ਚਾਹੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਹੋਰ ਤਰੀਕਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਵੀ ਵੱਖੋ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਸੂਬਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਵੱਖੋ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਏਰੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਡਿਸਟਰੀਬਿਊਟ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਸਪਰੈਡ ਅਰਾਊਂਡ ਹੋਣ।
ਮਾਈ ਲਾਸਟ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਧਾਲੀਵਾਲ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮਤਾ ਲਿਆਂਦਾ ਸੀ M112 ਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਤੇ C70 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੋਵਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਫਰਕ ਹੈਗਾ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਬਰੀਫਲੀ ਦੱਸੋ।
ਦੇਖੋ, ਜਿਹੜਾ M112 ਲਿਆਂਦਾ ਸੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਨਿੱਜਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਸੈਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਈ, ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੀ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ 'ਚ ਬਿਆਨ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਕਿ ਫੋਰਨ ਇੰਟਰਫੀਰੈਂਸ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਔਰ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਮੱਦੇਨਜ਼ਰ ਰੱਖ ਕੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੀ ਇਹ ਮੈਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਂਦਾ ਸੀ ਮੋਸ਼ਨ
ਯੂਨੈਨਿਮਸਲੀ ਪਾਸਡ
112। ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਂ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਦੂਜੀਆਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਰਾਬਤਾ ਪੈਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ, ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਾਇਮ ਕੀਤੀ, ਔਰ ਖਾਸ ਗੱਲ ਸੀਗੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਲਵਲੌਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਔਰ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਦੀ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪੂਰੀ ਹਾਸਲ ਸੀ। ਉਹ ਫਰਵਰੀ 'ਚ ਮੈਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਂਦਾ ਮੋਸ਼ਨ, ਹੁਣ ਉਹ ਮੋਸ਼ਨ 326-0 ਨਾਲ ਪਾਸ ਹੋਇਆ। ਪਰ ਉਹਦਾ ਹੀ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ, ਜਦੋਂ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲੀ ਆ, ਨਿੱਜਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਅਸੈਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਈ, ਔਰ ਮੈਂ ਮੋਸ਼ਨ ਵੀ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਂਦਾ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਐਡਵੋਕੇਸੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, ਔਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਰੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਾਕਸ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਥ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਮੇਰਾ। ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਦੀ ਸਦਕਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਬਿੱਲ C70 ਆਇਆ। ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਿੱਲ C70 ਆਇਆ ਉਹ ਇਹੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫੋਰਨ ਇੰਟਰਫੀਰੈਂਸ ਆ, ਇੰਟੀਮੀਡੇਸ਼ਨ, ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਡਾਇਸਪੋਰਾ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਆ, ਉਹ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬੰਦ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ। ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੀਸੇ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਕਟ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ 40 ਸਾਲ ਪੁਰਾਣਾ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮਾਡਰਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਨਾ ਪਊ, ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲ ਲਾਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਮਾਡਰਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਨਾ ਪਊ। ਨਵੀਆਂ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਆ ਗਈਆਂ ਹੁਣ, ਵਟਸਐਪ ਹੋਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹ ਕਮਿਊਨੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਇੰਟਰਸੈਪਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਔਰ ਰੋਕਣਾ, ਉਹ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਊ। ਸੋ ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨਵੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ C70 ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ, ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕਰਨ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਮੇਰਾ ਮੋਸ਼ਨ ਮੰਗਦਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਇੰਟਰਵੀਨ ਕਰੇ ਔਰ ਜਲਦੀ ਤੋਂ ਜਲਦੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਾ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਮੈਨੇਜ ਕਰੇ ਤੇ ਹੱਲ ਲੱਭੇ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹ C70 ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਹੱਲ ਹੈਗਾ।
ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਧਾਲੀਵਾਲ, ਕੀਪ ਅਪ ਦ ਗੁੱਡ ਵਰਕ।
ਮਿਹਰਬਾਨੀ, ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਚ ਰਹੋ। ਪ੍ਰੈਸ ਸਿੱਧੂ, ਫਿਰ ਮੇਰੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਔਰ ਸਾਂਝਾ TV ਦੇ ਸਮੂਹ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਪਿਆਰ ਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਤਿਕਾਰ।
ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਜੀ, ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਵੈਰੀ ਮਚ। So, Mr. Miller, welcome to Surrey. You did it in the morning, so had a chance for a citizenship ceremony. Well, 40 new Canadians, and now Surrey Board of Trade meeting. So there is a bunch of questions came from, large walk of lives, lot of immigration consultants. My quick question is, there is a lot of students and people not have a credentials or don't have a documentation. Is there any policy to make them a permanent, that way it will get the backlog out and make them a permanent resident? Because some people are 5, 7, 8 years, they paid a lot of money, and it could have been a good policy, I think.
I mean, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is if there is a pathway to regularization for people that perhaps have fallen out of status or have been here a long time. There are some very smart economic reasons for it, but there's also people that think that we are sometimes dealing with queue skipping as well. And so I think there's a fine social balance that we have to achieve, knowing that sometimes you have pools of labor here that could be absorbed into the permanent population. It's work that will continue to do, and to work with the government of BC that knows the labor market better in some areas than the federal government. But there's no doubt that there are people here that are perhaps entitled to become Canadians. How we do that as a country, I think, is an important reflection that I think haven't completed our thought process on. We've had waves of regularization in the past. They've been largely, I think, successful. But whether, when, and how we do that is sort of an open question mark. Perhaps in some sectors where there's critical labor needs, but also in areas where there can be backlogs. Again, I don't want to give the impression, and we should never give the impression, that it's okay to jump the queue, because that, I think, undermines Canadians that have fought really hard to do things all the right way. So again, some competing thoughts, some competing considerations, but it's an important question. And as you saw with the Surrey Board of Trade, lots of people that are here because of immigration, lots of people whose businesses depend on immigration. So it was really great to be here and be able to have that really dynamic chat with people.
And my last question, very quick comment on, there is a M112 and C70 bill came. Just brief comment on that.
Is that Sukh's? Sukh's. I always look I can't speak on the record, but I always
I already talked to you.
Very attentively to what Sukh does, and pay attention, obviously, all his
foreign interference.
Yeah, I mean, we have to tackle foreign interference in a smart way. There are some things that I can't speak publicly to because they deal with how our security agencies deal with the threats to Canadians. But my number one job, regardless of my cabinet position, is to make sure that people in Canada are and feel safe. And sometimes that is challenged by actions of foreign governments, and that is something we have to keep really focused on.
And another thing, we have to vet the criminal records, because we don't criminals coming to Canada.
No, absolutely not. I mean, let's not imagine that Canada is completely sealed and that people don't get in. But let's not also say that immigrants in Canada are criminals either, because we know that as a percentage of the population, very, very, very large law-abiding segment of the population. But sometimes things do happen and they're unfortunate, and we have to tighten up our way of vetting things. The argument that we can absolutely, under all circumstances, catch everything isn't something that has any basis in reality, but sometimes when we see things happen, we can adjust and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Have a good day. So ਅੱਜ ਸ਼ੈਰਟਨ ਗਿਲਫੋਰਡ 'ਚ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਸਰੀ ਬੋਰਡ ਆਫ ਟ੍ਰੇਡ ਦੀ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਵਾਈਟ ਰੌਕ ਸਰੀ ਬੋਰਡ ਆਫ ਟ੍ਰੇਡ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ, ਉੱਥੇ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਆਫ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਮਾਰਕ ਮਿਲਰ ਆਏ ਸੀ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਆਫ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਸੁਖ ਧਾਲੀਵਾਲ ਐਂਡ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਆਫ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਕੈਨ ਹਾਰਡੀ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਸੀ। ਤੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ issues ਹੈ, ਉਹਦੇ challenges ਹੈ। lot of immigration consultants, lot of business people attended that event, and ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਰੇ question address ਕੀਤੇ। students ਦੀ, international students ਦੀ problem, inflation ਦੀ problem, affordability ਦੀ problem। ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਡਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਚੇਂਜ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗੇ, ਪਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਚੈੱਕ ਐਂਡ ਬੈਲੈਂਸਿਸ ਲਾਉਣ ਲੱਗੇ ਆ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹੈ 2 ਸਾਲ ਲਈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਰੋਕਿਆ ਆ, ਤੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੰਸਟੀਟਿਊਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅੱਖ ਰੱਖਣੀ ਹੈ, ਕਿਹੜੇ ਆਥੋਰਾਈਜ਼ਡ ਇੰਸਟੀਟਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ, ਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਆਏ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਹਾਰਡਸ਼ਿਪ ਨਾ ਕਰਨੀ ਪਵੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ 40 ਘੰਟਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਘਟਾ ਕੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ 20 ਘੰਟੇ ਕੀਤੇ ਸੀ। ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਦੇ ਆਰ ਪਲੈਨਿੰਗ ਔਨ ਇਨਕਰੀਜ਼ਿੰਗ 24 or 25 ਆਵਰਸ। ਸੋ ਕਾਫੀ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਰਿਵੀਜ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਫਾਈਨ ਟਿਊਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਬਿੱਲ M112 ਮਿਸਟਰ ਧਾਲੀਵਾਲ ਨੇ ਲਿਆਂਦਾ ਸੀਗਾ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਯੂਨੈਨੀਮਸਲੀ ਪਾਸ ਹੋਇਆ, ਐਂਡ ਬਿੱਲ C70 ਜਿਹਦੇ ਕਿ ਫੋਰਨ ਇੰਟਰਫੇਰੈਂਸ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਲਾ ਲਓ, ਜਾਂ ਇੰਟੀਮੀਡੇਸ਼ਨ, ਜਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਧਮਕੀਆਂ ਦੇਣਾ, ਡਰਾਉਣਾ, ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਚੈੱਕ ਐਂਡ ਬੈਲੈਂਸ ਲਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਉਹ ਬਿੱਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਲਿਆਂਦਾ ਗਿਆ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੀਤੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਆਮ ਬੰਦਾ ਕੰਸਰਨਡ ਹੈ, ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਬੜੀ ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਈ। CJ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਰਿਪੋਰਟਿੰਗ ਫਰਮ ਸਰੀ, ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ।